Et vas-y, on t'écoute.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here to attend my PhD defense, and thank you to the jury members for having accepted to evaluate my work. So today I will present you the work of my thesis entitled Nanostructuration, Reinforcement in the Rubbery State, and Flow Properties of High Shear Strain of Thermoplastic Elastomers, Experiments and Modeling, supervised by Guy Mbaiza, Julien Mortoma, Claudio Fusco, and Laurent Chazot. So first, let's start with an introduction about thermoplastic elastomers. So in the field of polymers, we can distinguish two main classes of materials. On one side, the thermoplastics, which are characterized by the fact that they can be molten, and thus they can be transformed by extrusion or injection molding methods. And on the other side, we have cross-linked elastomers, which are characterized by their rubber behavior with high elasticity. And they cannot be molten because of the presence of covalent crosslinks. And in fact, thermoplastic elastomers, also called TPE, constitute an intermediate class which aims at combining the properties of both types of polymers. So to do so, the concept of thermoplastic elastomers consists in replacing the covalent links which are present in the cross-link rubbers by physical interactions. And to do that, we can use segmented copolymers, which are polymer chains composed of two types of blocks. The soft segment, which is a low TG polymer, and the hard segment, which is a high TG polymer. And this type of chains tend to form a phase-separated structure at room temperature with the association of hard segments, which forms physical nodes of a network which provides elasticity to the material. And this structure is thermoreversible, meaning that at high temperature, the breakup of the physical interactions results in the formation of a polymer melt. And thus you can see here the double advantage of this type of materials, which behave both like an elastomer at the temperature of interest and like a polymer melt at high temperature. And it is important to note that the hard segments can be either amorphous or semi-crystalline, and thus the physical nodes can be glassy nodules or crystallites. And in the case of this study, we will deal with the semi-crystalline hard segments. So concerning the applications, you can find thermoplastic elastomers in a wide range of industrial applications. In the automotive sector for their soft touch properties. You can find them for different tools for their good grip properties, also in the domain of sports, electrical insulation, medical equipment, and even in the road industry as bitumen modifiers. And this wide range of applications reveals the importance of being able to tune the mechanical properties of such materials, and especially their stiffness. But nowadays, the precise relationship between the structure at the nanoscale and the macroscopic behavior is still not fully understood. That's why there's a fundamental interest for the study of the reinforcement of TPE. So the concept of reinforcement is usually introduced in the case of nanocomposites, which consist in incorporating fillers, hard particles in a polymer. So if we look at the dynamic properties of a neat entangled polymer, we know that in a particular range of frequency, the storage modulus exhibits a plateau, GN0, which is called the plateau modulus. And in fact, in a nanocomposite, this plateau is increased to a higher value, GN. And this is what we call the reinforcement, which is noted key and defined as the ratio of the plateau modulus of the nanocomposite over the plateau modulus of the neat polymer. And its evolution as a function of the volume fraction of fillers, phi, is mainly explained by hydrodynamic effects, which are usually described by the Guthgold model represented here. However, hydrodynamic effects are not sufficient to completely explain the reinforcement in nanocomposites, especially at high volume fraction, where the reinforcement deviates from the Guthgold prediction because of the presence of bond rubber and the formation of a filler network. So this concept of reinforcement can also be extended to the case of to the case of semi-crystalline TPE. So here you can see the evolution of the storage modulus of a T40 PTHF TPE with different hard segments content. And from this curve, we can calculate the reinforcement key defined as the ratio of one TPE, of the modulus of one TPE over the modulus of the neat soft segment. And you can see its evolution here as a function of the volume fraction of crystallites. One could be tempted to compare this evolution with the classic Guthgold model, but as you can see, hydrodynamic effects seems really not relevant at all to describe the evolution of the reinforcement, which is much better described by an exponential function of the volume fraction. And in fact, this has been verified several times by compiling different data coming from different TPE chemistries, which seem to all follow the same exponential tendency as a function of the volume fraction of crystallites. But this is purely empirical. And in fact, nowadays, very few models propose a physical explanation of the reinforcement in TPE. However, a topological approach has been recently proposed in our group, and it is based on the classic theory of entropic elasticity, which stipulates that the modulus of an entangled polymer is proportional to the number density of entanglement strands, μ0. And in fact, the idea for this model for the reinforcement in TPE is based on the densification of the topological links around the crystallites. So this densification comes from the cooperation between the P entanglements, which are close to the crystallite, and this is defined by the length of the tube diameter, which is dt, which corresponds to the distance between two entanglements, two consecutive entanglements in a polymer chain. And in fact, these P entanglements, which were completely independent in the neat polymer, they now interact with each other through the NC crystalline stems in the crystallites, resulting in an effective topological link density μx equals NC times μ0. And then one can calculate the global topological link density in the whole material by considering a fraction phi of this dense network and the fraction 1 minus phi of neat polymer. And then from this topological link density, we can calculate the plateau modulus from entropic elasticity. And thus we can obtain the expression of the reinforcement here, which makes appear two important parameters, NC, so the number of crystalline segments inscribed in the sphere defined by dt, and phi, which is the crystalline volume fraction. And NC, which is the key parameter of the model, depends on two main parameters, the tube diameter of the soft segments, and W, which is the width of the crystallites. And also, it independently depends on the crystalline volume fraction phi, because W and phi are also related by an expression which depends on the local arrangements of the crystallites in space. So this model has already demonstrated his efficiency to predict the reinforcement behavior of a T40 PTHF TP at low volume fractions. However, a discrepancy has been noted at high volume fraction, and from what we know from the nanocomposite field, this could be due to two possible reasons. A possible percolation of the hard phase and the possible presence of a modified soft segment phase surrounding the crystallites. So if we sum up about the reinforcement in semi-crystalline TPE, we have seen that the reinforcement is much higher compared to nanocomposites, even at low volume fraction. We have a topological model, which seems to be quite relevant for low volume fraction in the case of 1 TP, but some questions remain at high crystallinity. And thus, we decided to build the following strategy for my PhD thesis, combining both experimental and numerical approaches in order to understand the evolution of the reinforcement as a function of the TP's nanostructure. So concerning the experimental approach, we studied an industrial TP, and we tried to modify the structure at the nanoscale by changing both the chain microstructure and the processing conditions in order to vary both the volume fractions of crystallites and the width of the crystallites, and then investigate the consequences on the reinforcement. And concerning the numerical approach, it consisted in developing a coarse-grained molecular dynamic model of TPE, which could provide a more systematic variation of the morphology and a better description of the molecular topology. So this presentation will be organized as follows. First, I will present you the materials of the study, which were both real materials for experiments and virtual materials for the numerical study. Then we will see how we managed to tune the structure at the nanoscale in both cases. And we will investigate afterwards the link with the reinforcement. And the last part will be focused on a deeper study of the behavior at high crystallinity, mainly investigated by the numerical model. And I will finish with conclusions and perspectives. So let's start with the presentation of the materials, and let's start with the real ones. So they were industrial TPE made of PBT-PTHF segmented block copolymers. We had 3 different type of chains with corresponding to 3 different hard segments contents, ranging from 30 to 65 weight% and referred as HS30, HS40, and HS65 in the flowing. They all have the same length, which is 25 kilogram per moles, and same polydispersity. And the number of hard segments they contained is comprised between 7 and 8 in average. So these materials were produced through different processes in order to vary as much as possible the structure. We performed solvent casting consisting in dissolving the TPE in a good solvent and followed by a slow evaporation. Then we performed also hot pressing, consisting in applying pressure in the molten state, and then a relatively quick cooling step. And finally, isothermal crystallization, which was performed inside a rheometer under small amplitude oscillatory shear. We also studied the effect of high shear conditions on the flow-induced crystallization of the hard segments, but this will not be presented today because of timing reasons. And concerning the numerical approach, so it consisted in building a coarse-grained model of TPE. So this kind of molecular approach is not about modeling every atom in the chains, but rather to model beads, coarse-grained beads, each one containing several atoms. So a very famous model of coarse-grained amorphous polymers is the one of Cramér-Grest, which consists in simulating beads interacting through two types of potentials, a Fennet potential for the interactions between consecutive beads in the chain, and a Lennard-Jones potential for the interactions between non-bonded bodies. And in fact, a modified version of this model has been proposed in our group by Mortoma et al., which includes the crystallization of the chains, providing a simple coarse-grained model of semi-crystalline polymers. And in our case, in order to build segmented copolymers, we used two types of beads, one for the hard segments and one for the soft segments. We decided to reuse directly the model of Mortoma to model the hard segments. And we took into account the physical differences between the hard segments and the soft segments in terms of density, chain stiffness, and interaction energy by adjusting the parameters of the model, which ruled the interactions between soft segment beads. And this was done using quite simple scaling rules, which makes the link between physical parameters such as density, Kuhn length, and solubility parameters, and the parameter of the simulation. Concerning the systems, because of computing reasons, we did not simulate multi-block copolymers with 7 or 8 hard segments per chain, but only tri-blocks, also called dumbbells, which consist in only one soft segment in the middle and 2 hard segments at the extremities. And we varied the hard segments content by changing the length of the hard segment. And once the polymer generated and equilibrated, we decreased the temperature in order to induce the crystallization of the hard segments, and we obtained the structures that you can see on this snapshot. So now that you have seen the material, let's continue with the characterization of the structure at the nanoscale. So the first quantity which can give us a global idea of the structure of our materials is the volume fraction of crystallites, which was determined by differential scanning calorimetry measurements. On one side, we can compare the hot press samples and solvent cast samples. So here, as one may have expected, we can see that the volume fraction of crystallites increases when increasing the hard segments content. But a more remarkable result is the similar volume fraction that we have in both hot pressed and solvent cast samples. Then on the other side, we have the isothermally crystallized samples. And here you can see that decreasing the temperature of the isothermal treatment leads to an increase of the volume fraction, phi, which results in a wide range of values of phi. Then, if we want to have a more precise idea of the structure at the nanoscale, we can use atomic force microscopy in tapping mode, providing phase lag images in which the contrast is related to a difference of hardness. So on these images, the bright regions represent a hard material, that is the hard segments crystallite in our case, and the dark regions represent the amorphous soft segment matrix. And here you have the images obtained for the HS40 sample processed from through solvent casting on the left and hot pressing on the right. So at first sight, you can see that we have similarities between these two images. In both cases, we have these ribbon-like or filament-like crystallites. But of course, we also have clear differences between both cases in terms of width of the crystallites. In fact, we found that the width of the crystallites in the hot press samples are approximately 3 times wider than the ones in the solvent cast samples. And then if we want to have more quantitative data on all samples, we can use small angle X-ray scattering. So here you can see the scattering intensity as a function of the scattering vector for the free hot press TPE. And from the position of the peak here, we can extract what we call the long period, D star, which corresponds to the average distance between the crystallites. And as you can see, if we compare with the solvent cast samples, we have a strong difference in terms of long periods. The value of D stars are much smaller for the solvent cast samples. And between hot press and solvent cast samples, we have intermediate values for the isothermally crystallized samples. And from this data, in fact, since we know the volume fraction of crystallites, which was determined from DSC, and assuming a particular arrangement of the crystallites in space, we are able to determine the width of the crystallites like this. And here you can see all the results that we obtained from thanks to SACS measurements. So the D star values on the left and W on the right. You can see that we have very few effects of the composition on the structure of the isothermally crystallized samples here and here. However, we can note the strong impact of the process, especially comparing hot press samples with the solvent cast samples. And all these results were in very good agreement with what we observed in AFM. So here is a small synthesis of the structure in all the samples. So on the left, the comparison between hot pressed and solvent cast samples. So very few effects on the volume fraction, but a strong effect on the width of the crystallites. And on the right, the isothermally crystallized samples with a strong impact of the temperature on the crystalline volume fraction, and very few effects on the width of the crystallites. Concerning the virtual materials, so the numerical modeling, here the analysis of the structure is a bit more simple, since we have access to the position of each bead in the simulation box. So thanks to an algorithm, we can extract the crystalline clusters in each simulation box that you can see on these plots, on these snapshots. And from that, we can calculate the volume fraction of crystallites here, represented as a function of the hard segments content. And we can also extract the width of the crystallites, W. And you can see that we managed to obtain a wide range of both W and phi values. So now that you have seen the structure of the materials, both experimental and numerical, we can try to make the link with the reinforcement. So let's start with the isothermally crystallized samples. So these samples, their crystallization was followed by rheological measurement in the linear regime until the sample reached an equilibrium, which is characterized by the plateau of the storage modulus that is reached at the end of the test. We used these values of plateau modulus we use these values as the plateau modulus of our systems in order to calculate the reinforcement key, which is represented here as a function of the volume fraction phi. So here you can see that the global evolution of the reinforcement follows the empirical exponential function that I mentioned in the introduction. And in fact, because we have characterized the structure of these materials, we are now able to calculate the topological model, which is represented here by the dotted line, by calculating the NC parameter from the measurements of the width of the crystallites, which was obtained by SACS measurements. And I remind you that this model, the blue dotted line, is not a fit, while it seems to really match the exponential trend at low volume fractions. However, we can notice that we still have a discrepancy at high volume fractions. Then we can investigate the reinforcement in the case of hot pressed and solvent cast samples. So here you can see dynamic temperature sweeps performed on the 6 samples. And from these measurements, we extracted the plateau modulus by taking the modulus at a temperature which is greater than the hot segments glass transition. And from these values, we calculated the reinforcement. And as you can see here, we can note that the plateau modulus of the hot press samples is systematically higher than the one of the solvent cast samples. And in fact, this can be explained by the topological model, which tells us that the reduced reinforcement, so K -1, is proportional to the NC parameter, which is itself proportional to the width of the crystallites. And since we know from the DSC measurements that we have the same volume fractions in both hot pressed and solvent cast samples, we expect the ratio of the reduced reinforcement to be equal to the ratio of the width of the crystallites. And in fact, this is what we verify here by plotting these two quantities. So as I showed before, you can remind that the hot press samples have crystallites which are 3 times wider than the crystallites of the solvent cast samples. And remarkably, we found approximately the same factor 3 for the reduced reinforcement, which corroborates the hypothesis of this topological model and confirms the role of the width on the reinforcement. So thanks to experiments, we have revealed the influence of 2 key parameters for the reinforcement, the crystalline volume fraction and the width of the crystallites. So now let's see if we can find, if we can confirm these results from the numerical simulations and maybe try to go a bit further. So from our numerical simulations, we extracted the relaxation modulus, G of T, using a Green-Kubo analysis. And we obtained this nice evolution of the relaxation modulus, which shows the evolution as a function of the hard segments content. And from these plots, we extracted the plateau modulus by fitting the flow region with a decreasing exponential. And from these values of plateau modulus, we calculated the reinforcement key. We put it as a function of the volume fraction of crystallites. And once again, you can see that the global tendency is in good agreement with the exponential, the empirical exponential, which reinforce our confidence in our simulations. And since we know, since we have characterized the structures of these systems, thanks to the algorithm which identifies the crystallites, we are also able to calculate, to evaluate the topological model, which is represented by the black squares on this graph. And once again, I remind you that this model is not a fit, even if it seems to really match the exponential trend at low volume fractions. But once again, we also have this, strong discrepancy at high values of phi. But this time, we expect the numerical model to provide us with insights to understand what happens at high crystallinity. And this is what we will deal with in this last part. So a classic approach in numerical simulations of semi-crystalline systems to study the evolution of the modulus is to study the topology of the amorphous part, and especially of the amorphous segments which are between the crystallites. So in fact, we can classify these amorphous segments in 3 categories. The first one, the dangling ends, which are not supposed to contribute to the reinforcement, since they are connected only once to a crystallite. Then we have the loops, which are connected twice to the same crystal. They can contribute to the reinforcement if they are entangled. And finally, we have the tie segments, which bridge 2 different crystallites and which are supposed to contribute to the reinforcement, since they constitute a direct path for the stress. So here I plotted the evolution of these 3 quantities as a function of the volume fraction of crystallites. So the number of dangling ends, ties, and loops normalized by the number of crystalline segments. As one may have expected, when increasing the volume fraction of crystallites, we can see a decrease of the number of dangling ends. And at the same time, we have an increase of the ties, and the loops remains approximately constant at low volume fractions. But then passing a value of phi, which is around 8%, we can see a transition. The number of ties decreases while the number of loops starts to increase. And in fact, this transition is also seen on the number of individual crystals in the simulation box, which increases at low volume fractions and then decreases at higher values of phi. And this transition can be explained by the coalescence of the crystallites. We think that at low volume fractions, we form small crystals well dispersed in the simulation box. When we increase the volume fraction of crystals, we increase the number of different crystallites, and thus we increase the number of tie segments. But if we increase even more the volume fraction of crystallites, the small crystals will be merged to form bigger ones, and the tie segments, which were before between different crystallites, will be transformed into loops. And we think that this is what we see on these results. And what is interesting here is that this transition occurs simultaneously with the discrepancy between the actual reinforcement and the prediction of the topological model. However, even if the coalescence is pretty clear in the simulation, we haven't seen any percolation of the crystalline phase through the whole simulation box. And if you remind what I said in the introduction, we can see 2 possible explanations for the stronger reinforcement at high volume fraction: a possible percolation of the crystallites and a modification of the soft phase near the crystallites. And since we haven't seen any percolation of the crystalline phase, we think we have to investigate the second option, which concerns the confinement of the soft segments between the crystallites. And to do so, a simple approach consists in comparing the equilibrium end-to-end distance of the soft segments, RSS0, with the remaining space between the crystallites, which is noted d star minus h here. So this equilibrium distance of the end-to-end distance of the soft segments, it basically represents the size of the soft segments at equilibrium, while this quantity represents the remaining space for the soft segments. And what you can see on this graph is that at low volume fraction, the remaining space between the crystallites is larger than the equilibrium size of the soft segments, meaning that we do not expect the soft segments to see any perturbation of the crystallites. But at high volume fraction, the situation is it is the opposite. As you can see here, the remaining space between the crystallites is now smaller than the equilibrium size of the soft segments. And therefore, we expect here a modification or a perturbation of the soft segments. And the transition occurs still in the range of volume fractions that we have seen before, meaning around 8%. If we want to go further in this investigation, we can try to compare the actual conformations of the soft segments in our simulation box with the conformation at equilibrium. And to do so, we can represent here the internal elongation of the soft segments, which is defined as the ratio of the internal distance in the simulation box over the internal distance in the case of a neat soft polymer, which is considered at equilibrium. And here on the graph, you can see the reference, which is the equilibrium, which is represented by the dotted orange line. And you can see that when we increase the hard segments content and thus the crystalline volume fraction, the elongation of the soft segments increases. Thus, we do see the presence of out of equilibrium conformations here, which can contribute to the stronger reinforcement that we have seen at high crystallinity. So to sum up about the stronger reinforcement at high crystallinity, we have seen that we have a coalescence of the crystallites, but no percolation. And we have evidenced the presence of out of equilibrium soft segments conformations, which can contribute to the stronger reinforcement. And from these two results, we can imagine the presence of a percolating hybrid hard phase, which could be composed of both crystallites and this modified soft segment phase. But this is still speculative and is part of the perspectives of my thesis, since it requires more detailed and further investigations. So to conclude, I think we can summarize the main outcomes of my thesis in 3 parts. First, about the nanostructuration, we evidenced the strong influence of the processing conditions on the resulting morphology. And we also studied the effect of high shear conditions on the flow-induced crystallization of the hard segments, which was not presented today because of timing reasons. Concerning the reinforcement, we have evidenced the key role of 2 main parameters, the volume fraction of the crystallites and the width of the crystallites, in good agreement with a topological model, which was validated at low crystallinity. But we showed also that studying the soft segments topology is not enough to explain the stronger reinforcement at high crystallinity. And for that, we proposed an explanation based on the cooperation between the coalescence of the crystallites and the modification of the soft phase, forming a hybrid network, a hybrid percolating network. And concerning the numerical part, I think we provided a quite successful and quite original coarse-grained model for molecular dynamic simulations of TPE. And we found good agreements with experiments in terms of phase separation, crystallization, and linear mechanical behavior. We can imagine several perspectives for this thesis. First, of course, the validation of our hypothesis about this hybrid percolating network. And to do so, it would be necessary to study the dynamics of this modified soft phase, and then investigate if we really have this percolation of the hybrid network. And this is still in progress since it has been started very recently. And the second point concerns a limitation of the semicrystalline of the coarse grain model of semicrystalline polymers, which struggles to describe the behavior at large strains because of too weak crystals. So it would be interesting to improve this model to make it more realistic. And this is the work of a new PhD thesis, which will start, which has been started quite recently at Mathis. So finally, I'd like to thank all the people who collaborated to this work. First, the jury members for being here today and for having reviewed my work. My supervisors who guided me during these 3 years, Laurent, Guillaume, Julien, and Claudio. I also thank all the people who collaborated with me during these 3 years. I also would like to thank all the members of the lab for their, with whom I shared these 3 fantastic years. And finally, my friends and family. And thank you all for your attention.